Okay. And here. All right. Let's see here. Okay, we're not too late. Hey, Carrie. Let me send the guest a note. And let's see. Q. Okay, Patrick, I'm going to pull you up in just a second, right after this intro. All right. I see that you're in the Zoom room. So about 3 minutes, I'm going to share just some groups and let people come in. So we are live on Facebook. Let me go do the intro. Be right back. Todd Medina, Soldier One Studios.
This is a Chucky Beat production.
It's also Soldier One Studios production. Appreciate Chucky for the good beats. Let's do it. Confusing our minds, abusing our lives, diluting our pride, dividing mankind, forced brothers and sisters against each other, tried to own the spirit of Gaia Mother. You know her, she lives in you, you live in her, but you're supposed to love her, not own her. So before you go talking that talk you ain't walking, ask yourself, who are you? Are you better than me? Am I better than you? Is she? What about him? There is no sin, it's ours to win. No religious spin, it's not a game, it's a walk of fame. Soul Highway. You getting my drift? It's been slowing us down, got memories to recover, new worlds discover. Removing the lines, to thine own self be true, uncovered. This truth set straight in our eyes. Shedding the skins, breaking the shell, removing this spell, another candidate trying to sell. If I'm going to hell, gonna be for my mind, heart, spirit curled into the arms of oneness. Not the false flags unfurled, lies bringing wars. I will not ignore a world we create ourselves. Cause I'm on the soul highway, man. There is no sin, it's ours to win. No religious spin, it's not a game. Walk of fame. Soul highway. I ain't chasing anything. I ain't bracing for anything. Man, God's no threat to me. Diamonds in the rough, we just as tough. Come through the same Stargate as my brothers. Come from the same palace where all you sisters are the queens. We cannot rule out Anunnaki, reptilian bloodline royalty, Project Blue Beam. We're gonna rule in the gods we followed. You know, selling the Nirvana, come tomorrow. Sticking us with an attitude as long as it doesn't happen to me. It's okay if it happens to you? Nah, that's just not true. Little freestyle. We are the magic. Don't feed the tragic. That doesn't mean don't act like it doesn't go on, because you know that it does, but don't let it get to you. Not to the point where it brings out all those fear-based, charismatic children, all those wild emotions that we try to substantiate like anger and jealousy and hate. Yeah, that's not our fate. Yeah. Fear of faith, that's what it's all about. So bring your A game. This is the ascension, the apocalyptic unveiling. This is our lives we are unveiling. And I'll see you there on the soul highway. That's what this game is all about. For every step you take away from the world, you walk toward the other side of truth. And that's Soulology. Namaste. What's going on, Patrick?
Hello, how's it going today?
It's going very good. Let me just we do everything here spontaneously, intuitively, creatively, imaginatively, and depending on what we're talking about, courageously. So it's not always in the perfect order. It's a pleasure to meet you. We're just going to get to know each other.
Thank you
right
very much.
here.
It's a joy to meet you.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to have you here and share space with you. I've got some really cool imagery behind you.
Thank you so much.
I'm not that I don't know if that's galactic or indigenous.
You know, it's a little bit of each. It's all painted by a friend of mine who lives in Kansas, who paints what he sees in his mind's eye.
Wow.
And it really deeply resonates with me because it's very similar to what I see when I'm on a shamanic journey myself. So, and I'm sure other people see things similar. Some people read meaning into the glyphs that are on there, and it's meant to be enigmatic.
Yeah, it looks to be a little all of the above, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because this is your first time on Soul Speaks 5D, I do want to try to stay with a little bit of professionalism, and I want to read your bio, if you give me a second. Just so everybody can get a little idea, a little backdrop before we jump into this thing and have a conversation, if that's cool with you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Patrick Prohaska has always has always had a keen scientific interest into the mysteries of the world. For his undergraduate degree, he studied history and philosophy of science at the University of Kansas, where he specialized in the history of chemistry, from its medieval roots in alchemy to the scientific revolution. He carried his passion for scientific exploration into his master's in the religions of ancient India. Throughout his academic career, he dabbled in various healing modalities, testing them to see which ones worked for him, studied the radiance technique version of Reiki, became an expert in aromatherapy and herbal medicine, developed a thriving massage therapy practice in Italy in the early 1990s, also taught various forms of yoga, as well as stock Pilates. He honed his teaching skills in graduate school, was a professor of philosophy and religion at a small college in central Iowa. Like many graduate students, he funded his education in the restaurant industry. By the time he was ready to start research for his doctoral dissertation, he'd already served as a general manager at 2 world-class restaurants. As university support for low-profit programs such as Asian religions began to dry up, he decided to abandon his dream of teaching and instead embrace a career in restaurant management. His first step was to dive once again into the universal principles and practices that had previously brought him joy. He studied law of attraction, life coaching with the Quantum Success Coaching Academy, received multiple certifications in theta healing, became a certified practitioner and teacher of awakening dynamics, and dabbled in countless other healing systems. Eventually, he synthesized his own technique, Light Bridge, and established Light Bridge Academy to share his tools and his techniques with the world. Welcome to the show. Great bio. There's a lot of information in there. Yeah, very comprehensive life. It looks like a journey that you've been on, life path. Where are you located now? Are you in the
Right now, I'm in Southern California. I live in Palm Springs.
Oh, wow.
And I feel the urge to move every 4 or 5 years or so. I feel the urge to move someplace new.
Right on.
So I'm not sure where I'm going next, but for now, Southern California is my home.
Well, we're over in LA. We just came over from Hawaii 2 weeks ago today, and we're waiting on our car, which will be here the 2nd of September. And then we're going to do the same thing. But we may be headed out your way. We may be going over to stay with a dear sister that lives in Hemet. But we haven't.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we haven't quite worked out the logistics yet. We're not quite sure, but it's a high probability we'd be headed that way. So we might have to look you up over there. We've got some other friends over there. So I like to ask people when they first come on. I mean, a lot of these stories are the same. 1,300 plus episodes, and people say, I was born awake. I always had that connection. I came out of high school, college, whatever. I entered the matrix and I went to sleep, had a family, had kids, went into the work world. and then something started thumping on my head. Most of them around 2012, give or take a couple of years. Some very much earlier than that. Some in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. What's your story? Did you have any type of traumatic kicking the pants type of scenario?
Oh my God! My story is exactly what you just outlined right there. So when I was a child, I was meditating spontaneously. I was seeing things intuitively in ways that other people didn't understand. I remember when I was very young, probably 5 or 6 years old, I used to meditate a lot, and the people around me had no idea what I was doing. They thought that I was having seizures, or they thought that I was spacing out. And, they called me Space Case for a long time because, I would just wanted to meditate. There were times when I would sneak down to the church that was behind the house where I lived, and I would climb into this little alcove that was designed for a statue, and I'd sit and meditate. And I'd sit there for 90 minutes, 2 hours. Yeah. Eventually, my brother would find me and ridicule me mercilessly. He'd ask me what I was doing, and of course, I had no idea. I didn't know the word meditate, so I would just say, "I'm thinking."
Yeah.
So, that sort of experience where you're naturally driven to do something that is incredibly powerful, that other people don't understand, it eventually gets punished out of you. Yeah. And that's essentially what happened to me. I stopped doing it because everyone laughed at me. And I dabbled in certain things over the years. At a very, very young age, I must have been 7 or 8, I started doing yoga.
Wow.
And I got this really funny book that was Richard Hittleman's Yoga for Housewives. And it was the most sexist thing I've ever seen in my life. It was all about how housewives can do yoga to make themselves sexier for their husbands.
Oh, God.
Even then, it kind of turned my stomach. I knew that the framing of it was really limiting and even oppressive. Yeah. But yet there I was in my room, hiding this book from my family members, doing yoga at 7 or 8. And, you know how brothers and sisters are. They barge in, they laugh at you because they see you in this bizarre position with a book for housewives in front of you. And
right.
Once again, it got beaten out of me. So, and so from there, it was just this circuitous path, backward and forward, deeper into mystical arts, and then back out of it again. I went through periods of extreme atheism and agnosticism, and ridicule of people who I kind of played along with that as well. Go back and forth. I studied religion in ancient India from an academic perspective, and then I also studied it from a practitioner perspective. And I'd flip-flop between them. But the event, 2012, 2013 actually, in the course of my life, I've had several financial collapses. Mm-hmm. And I've been on the verge of homelessness several times. And if it weren't for friends who helped me out, I actually would have been homeless a couple of times. Yeah. But in 2013, I had one of my really powerful transformative experiences in which it was probably a little bit before that, probably 2011. But anyway, I had lost my job. I couldn't find another one. I had sent out hundreds of resumes in San Francisco. Nobody would hire me. I couldn't get an interview. We were in the depths of the Great Recession, if not the Great Depression, at that point in time. And I had nothing left to lose. So I decided I was going to test law of attraction. So I started this project that I called the Optimism Project. And I forced myself all day long to think nothing but positive thoughts. And I wore a rubber band around my wrist like a lot of people do, and I would snap it to punish myself every time I caught myself thinking something negative. And I did this for about 6 weeks, even though I was in the midst of this horrible financial meltdown. I had no idea if I was going to be thrown out on the street, lose my apartment, everything else. And the results were spectacular.
Wow.
Within a couple of months, I landed my all-time favorite job in the restaurant industry. I fell in with a circle of friends that I was very, very close with. I found an apartment that cost half the amount that I was paying for the apartment I was previously in, and it was in a better part of town. Everything just started clicking. Everything fell into place in a way that was nothing short of miraculous. But then once things started clicking, things started moving, the way I wanted, I let my guard down and I started thinking the negative thoughts again. I stopped monitoring my subconscious and conscious thoughts, and I stopped punishing myself when I would think something negative. In other words, I slipped back into old patterns. I slipped back into old habits. And before long, that beautiful new world I created, it just collapsed.
Yeah.
So it was at that point that was the transformative part of it, that second collapse.
Yeah.
Because what that second collapse taught me was it's really not enough to just say affirmations. It's not enough to do all this surface level stuff where you're forcing yourself to think positive thoughts and to force the energy to work in a certain way. You have to internalize it. And the only way to internalize it is to really dig deep into those subconscious belief systems and change them from the core. You have to, pull out those traumatic experiences. You have to rewire the thought processes because they're all hardwired into the brain after a while.
Yeah.
So that was actually where the evolution started, where I started getting traction, and that's how I started developing Lightbridge. So yeah,
that sounds like shadow work. Like, I mean,
a lot of it is shadow work, and
because I can relate to what you're saying, a similar path, in a lot of ways. But I remember early in the game, before I was technically awake, let's just put it that way. So this would be back in the 80s, and I was reading a lot of, started reading some self-help, like Napoleon Hill. Started with Napoleon Hill and Clement Stone, and some of the more contemporary ones. One of them was Brian Tracy, which I really liked because he brought in some metaphysics. But he talked about that, and I adopted the methodology that he had, which was to write down these 5 things every day, because by writing it down and saying it, internalize it. But to your point, that worked fine, but it didn't address the unknown resistances and unknown shadows and obstacles that I had that were blocking me, which I didn't find out until years and years later. That's why I always kind of had an aversion. Because after that, the law of attraction came out, The Secret came out, and I'm like, I know that doesn't work. It doesn't work like that, because you got to go, like you said, you got to go deep into that hardwired programming. So you've written, I know you've got a book out, because I went to your page, right?
Oh, yeah. I have it right here. So.
Yeah. I want to talk about that. Usually we do that toward the end of the show and give you some time to talk about whatever you want to, any events, your website, we'll pull it up and that type of thing. So I know you've been doing this for quite some time. Everybody's story is different, and it's just a personal interest of mine. That there's so much in the field of the universal faces that speak to us. The universe speaks to each one of us in a unique way, right?
Yes.
Some of it's galactic, some of it's angelic, some of it's elemental, some of it's a planet. It's all these different things. Are there any particular faces of the universe that you're most resonant with, that you work through, or do you work through a singular voice?
Well, you're absolutely right that it's a multi-dimensional universe that we live in, and different people have different orientations, and they understand the truth of the universe from different perspectives. So, one of the things I always say is nobody has a monopoly on truth. And just because my experience is different than yours, it doesn't mean that mine is less or more. It doesn't mean that yours is less or more. So I am probably what I would call an internalist as opposed to an externalist. And I know that there are lots and lots of people who find immense power in connecting with external sources of power that they interpenetrate with ultimately. So I'm the type of person who likes to turn inward. My primary belief system is that absolutely everything that we experience is colored by or a projection of our thoughts, our beliefs, our judgments, our expectations, and our traumatic history. Yeah. So all of that kind of works together within the subconscious mind to project outward into this matrix, whatever your reality is. And of course, my reality isn't the reality because we live in a collective of billions of beings who are all projecting their realities as well. And all of these different realities intersect and reinforce each other, and that creates the solid physical world that we all navigate. Okay. So for me, if I'm connecting with a higher source of power, I generally turn to the higher self, because the way I understand the higher self, it's not some distant being that you eventually grow into that's impossible to access right now. You are your higher self at all times. You're just wearing all of these goggles and masks that prevents you from seeing your true nature as your higher self.
Yeah.
So your higher self is you, completely and utterly free of all of the limiting thoughts and beliefs and judgments that limit you in this lifetime. And in a sense, it's the original you, the pristine you before all of that programming developed. It's also what you're growing into. It's who you will be after you have completed your ascension growth process. So because it knows exactly where you're going to end up, it's very easy for you to connect with your higher self and allow it to give you a helping hand. It knows exactly what you're going to do in order to grow into your pinnacle consciousness.
Yeah.
And therefore, because it knows what you can do, you can ask it for assistance to pull towards it. That's about as external as I get. So I tend not to work with angels or astrology. I think all of it is very valid.
Yeah.
And it's especially valid for people who are practitioners and they're well versed in it. But for me, that's that's like the external orientation. Now, ultimately, none of that matters because every single thing in the universe interpenetrates.
Right.
That interpenetration, I'm inside you and you're inside me. I'm inside every single atom that exists in the universe, and the entire universe is inside me.
Right on.
So ultimately, it doesn't matter whether you're externally oriented or internally oriented. But for me, that's where the power lies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's, and a lot of people, and myself included, going back to 2011, 2012, when the universe was speaking to me in apparitions and voices and images, it seemed very external. And over time, what happened with myself and many others that I've talked to, they eventually embodied that stuff and then got to the point that you're talking about. One of the things that I find very interesting about what you're saying, and I think that's important, and I don't think is talked about enough, is how did you and do you cultivate a direct communion or connection with your higher self, with a trajectory towards more and more clarity and that type of thing? Do you have a way of doing it? And do you have a way of teaching people to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I do. And the first thing I want to say is I fail all the time. So I think like a lot of people, we have all these spiritual ideals and we know what we're striving for, but we fall short and sometimes we beat ourselves up for it. So, the first thing I do is I don't expect myself to have a non-human existence. We're all embodied human beings. We're all, for whatever reason, we've chosen to take on this human existence and to be in a physical body that has physical human DNA for whatever purpose. I think we didn't do that in order to have a non-human existence. Exactly. So I'm not the type of person who engages in toxic positivity. I don't believe that if you're spiritual, you should never get angry. if you're spiritual, you should never have a bad day, that if something disturbs you, it's evidence that you're not really following the path. All of that is, in my mind, that's they call it spiritual bypassing, that belief that these human characteristics are somehow anti-spiritual and you need to separate them. Of course, that goes back to Plato and the Platonic dualism, where spirit and physical matter are separate and distinct from each other, and one is good and one is bad. Don't really need to get into that, but that attitude infuses a lot of what people believe.
Yeah.
So for me, I do meditate. I do healing processes on myself. I do try to listen to the messages that my higher self has for me, but I don't always meditate in the traditional ways. For me, hiking is meditation. Mm-hmm. It's my absolute favorite form of meditation, is to go out into the wilderness and just clear my mind and walk and just see what comes to me. I'm a huge fan of ayahuasca. I'm a huge fan of breath work, and I do a breath technique that I call dry dosing, which is designed to stimulate the centers of the brain that get stimulated when you're taking a psychedelic drug or something else. It's it's a wonderful way to have the psychedelic experience without the legal jeopardy. So, right. And it's free. So I do a little bit of that. I do a number of different practices, and I teach a lot of different practices to my clients. But there's not one thing that stands out as supreme.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think, for some people, because I've seen a lot of people ask the question, I mean, I never did it consciously till I met my partner. Mm-hmm. I had no concept of it. I never really thought about it.
Yeah.
And then one day, she said to me, just pull up your higher self. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Which, it was that simple. I just sat down, I just said, come see me or whatever, and boom. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is because I've had a lot of people, I've watched their comments and seen their questions. How do you do that? And so I know it's a little bit tricky because we have this human, the cognitive, the human brain, the conscious, whatever you want to call it. And then we have that space in between, that intuitive, that knowing. Mm-hmm. But something to this effect. Do you pose verbal questions? Is it, or is it just a silence where the intuitive takes over, where the knowing going both ways is already, engaged in this conversation? I mean, I know that sounds a little bit hokey, but, or breaking it down to a point where it may sound a little hokey. But I mean, when you have this conversation, is there a verbalization to it?
For me, there is. Okay. And I know that for other people, there doesn't need to be a verbalization. For me, it's almost the situation where I'm channeling my higher self. So I'll have a conversation with my higher self that will kind of flow through me. Mm-hmm. What normally happens is when I'm hiking, at a certain point, I'll just click into a spontaneous lecture of some sort.
Yeah.
It's like I'm walking along and then suddenly I start speaking. I have no idea what I'm going to be speaking about or even any intention to speak. And then suddenly this whole lecture will come flowing out of me. Yeah. And it's really awesome when that happens. And sometimes the material that's channeled is completely and utterly unexpected. I was walking along and like this lecture about spirituality in ancient Egypt started flowing out of me. And I said, where is this coming from and how is it relevant? Because I felt so disconnected from it. And yet there it was.
Yeah. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
That's a good explanation.
In terms of practical matters, the issue that we face as human beings, especially since we are emerging from the age of Pisces, there were certain structural limitations that we all just accepted as reality as the human species in the age of Pisces. In the age of Pisces, was an age of three-dimensional awareness. and navigating the physical world, figuring out how to navigate the physical world, and the very firm belief among most people that power involves the manipulation of external circumstances. Yeah. So it's all about getting the resources. It's all about the zero-sum game. If I have more, somebody else has less. If they have more, I have a little bit less. Therefore, I have to compete and manipulate and place myself in the right place to get more for me, even though it hurts other people. That's all the age of Pisces thinking. But because we're growing out of that, it's still, it's in our collective consciousness. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the basic belief systems, the higher dimensional awareness is difficult. A lot of us just learn from the age of childhood or from the age of birth that number one, you can't have higher dimensional awareness. Number two, you're forbidden to have it because it's somehow anti-spiritual or anti-God, or God will get angry, or whatever the other reasons are. Number three, the biggie, it's dangerous to tap into unseen forces, and therefore you should avoid them at all cost. And then the belief that it's simply not possible for me. I can't do it. I don't have the capacity. Only special people can do that. Right. So if we can clear those just basic fundamental belief systems about the nature of spiritual awareness itself, it becomes a lot more natural for people. In Lightbridge and in some other systems, it's called meta-healing. Yeah. It's called healing the belief systems about what healing actually is, or healing the belief systems about what intuition actually is. You clear away the belief that claircognizance or clairvoyance are extremely rare and difficult to learn, then it becomes so much easier to actually step into your claircognizance.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and this is this is a very I don't know, it's an evolving thing for everybody. Like you said, nobody has a monopoly on the truth. We all got a little piece of the puzzle. That seems to be the way it looks to me. Now, one of the things that you hear a lot of is unconditional love. Mm-hmm. Oneness, unconditional love, no separation, self-value. Where does unconditional love, self-love, self-care, self-value come into play? How does it come into play as we work to clear this space that you're talking about, to clear this illusion or whatever's shrouding, our light? Where does that come into play? How do we attack that? Hey, I've heard people say, give yourself a bath every night. I'm not making fun of anybody. I'm just saying, again, these are consciously intended things to love yourself more. But do you have any methods for that? Do you have any advice on how we can raise the self-love quotient and therefore clear this stuff away?
Yeah, well, I would say it's crucial. But people have misconceptions, or at least in my mind, people have some misconceptions about what unconditional love is. So if you're thinking about unconditional love directed at another person, it doesn't mean tolerating everything that they're doing. It means loving them for who they are in spite of whatever it is limiting them or is limiting you. It's an energy that creates a healing atmosphere in which people can grow and develop in new ways. So first of all, unconditional love is not toleration. It's not putting up with things that you dislike. It's not like a child saying to mom, oh, you're supposed to unconditionally love me, therefore you should not punish me for this bad thing that I've done, or you should let me get away with it or look the other way in the future. So it's not that at all. A lot of us, even though we pay lip service to unconditional self-love, we still beat ourselves up on a regular basis. Yeah. And I would suspect that almost every single person listening right now knows, if they look at themselves clearly, that you will say things to yourself when you're mad at yourself that you would never say to another person. Just think of the vicious things that you will say to yourself that you'd feel horrible if you ever said that to another person, and yet that pops out of you in an instant.
Yeah.
And I will beat myself up for the tiniest little thing. I'll forget where my glasses are, and then I'll just scream at myself. It's the old me. It's not so much now, for being such a moron. Now, all of that energy, that's all affirmations as well. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So unconditional love means clearly seeing yourself for who you are and all of your flaws, all of your limitations, all of your desires, and all of your potential, so you can step into that potential and grow.
Yeah.
And it comes from the heart. And it's there's no greater, more powerful force in the universe.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I found that a lot of people simply don't believe that. They'll pay lip service to unconditional love, but they don't believe it's powerful.
Yeah.
So for example, in my healing practice, when I'm training people in how to become a Lightbridge practitioner, I tend to get a lot of people who want to use their healing gifts on other people without their permission. So they want to learn a healing technique so they can do something to change their cousin's behavior, their daughter's behavior, their husband's behavior, but that person doesn't want that healing energy. They feel driven to do it anyway.
Yeah.
That's not unconditional.
No.
I'll say if you see somebody who's in pain and you offer them healing energy and they say, no, go away, I don't want it, I don't want to work with you, I don't believe in it, or whatever else, send unconditional love.
Yeah.
And it's up to them whether they accept it or embody it or not. And it's up to them whether they reject it or not. But you've done your part. You don't have to, it's not your duty to fix somebody else when they don't want to be fixed.
Yeah.
And people will say, well, that's not satisfactory. I'm not doing enough. And I'm saying, well, if you don't think unconditional love is enough, then you don't understand the power of unconditional love.
Yeah. Well, plus, and there's a good argument at this stage of the game anyway that, applying all that to yourself is far more effective than anything you could do for anyone else. Because at the end of the day, we all do it for ourselves. It just doesn't always look that way. But, that's one of the things I find really interesting about what you've been talking about, and metaphorically, I think as the individual goes, so goes the collective. I love what you were talking about when you first started to hit pay dirt. It was very similar. Yeah, it was very similar to my experience in the late 80s and early 90s. But the rubber band, the fact that you were actually inflicting pain on yourself to keep you in line, and then to hear you now 25 years later, or whatever it is, 20 years later, that's the difference. I can see, like in this case where it was that whole 3D hamster in a wheel in the grind. It's all about comparisons and competition, and you're inflicting this pain, which we've all been there, in junior high school playing sports, and we had that mean coach that we, out of the fear factor, we just excelled, But this other method, this 5D-ish method, or whatever you want to call it, this higher awareness method, where you've arrived now and many people are, is, I think, starting to tackle this issue in a kind of a natural way of raising the self-love quotient, raising the self-care quotient, unconditional love, being an inside job first, because we've all seen that the wounded healer thing's gone away. Or is going away.
Yeah, that is such a limiting mythology. The wounded healer, the starving artist, it's so limiting. So I'm so glad you're talking about this, because within Lightbridge, I call this the body love principle. Body love, the body love principle. So essentially, the core principle is this, that if you love yourself unconditionally, exactly as you are right now, it empowers you to love yourself even more in the future. So most people, they'll push back on that. I've had a lot of people say, well, it's it's a bad idea to love yourself exactly as you are right now, because then you're complacent. You'll never do anything to change. If you love yourself the way you are right now, you won't want to change anything in your life, and you'll stay stuck forever. Yeah. So self-love is dangerous in their minds. So my response to that is, that's not how the law of attraction works. So the law of attraction is essentially whatever energy you project into the universe, it gets reflected back to you in some form. So if you are a very angry person, you get anger reflected back at you. If you are a self-loving person, you get self-love reflected back to you. So if you're one of those people that wants to motivate yourself to lose weight by standing in front of a mirror and saying things like, just look at you, you fat slob. Yeah. What the hell is wrong with you? Lose some weight. Get out there and do something. What's wrong with you? That might motivate you in the short term, but in the long term, it is in conjunction with the law of attraction. You're sending this energy of self-hatred out to the universe, and the universe will reflect it back to you with more opportunities to hate yourself. If you're in the energy of loving yourself exactly as you are right now, the universe will send you opportunities to love yourself even more. So you love yourself unconditionally in spite of and in full awareness of all the things that you would like to change, in full awareness of what your limitations are. Yeah. And that way you can empower yourself to overcome those limitations and grow in a certain way. So it's crucial.
Yeah. And so does that also address, I mean, it's almost like there's two different scenarios. So you got the scenario of, let's just say, shadow work, and a scenario of unconditional love for self-expansion. Let's just put it that way. I know in the beautiful paradoxical teachings of the universe, they're really all one and the same. Mm-hmm. But we're here as a human hybrid soul going through this transition with all these, with all the experience we've had, moving out of one thing, moving into another, but actually integrating both. What I'm talking about is, if we're addressing, and I know there's no right answer, I'm just trying to get my own expansion here, but if we're addressing in some way that works for us, the expansion of unconditional love for self-value and everything that goes with that, are we automatically clearing things such as false self-shame, false self-judgment, false self-guilt? Are we clearing that stuff, or are those two different steps?
Well, they are two different steps. You could clear it all with unconditional love, but it would probably take a very, very long time, multiple lifetimes, because there really is a certain, here's how the ego works. Let's see if I can phrase this in a way that's really concise. When you experience traumatic events in your life, when you get punished for doing something that's normal and natural, such as like a little child touching himself and mom comes along and slaps his hand and screams at him. When you have a traumatic experience and you're not able to process that trauma in the moment, you shove that trauma down and it gets kind of infused into your energy system. If the pain of that experience is enough, you will actually fragment your persona. And I think a lot of us have fragmented personas. The fragments of our persona that are holding on to the trauma of sexual abuse, for example, our ego and our core persona, we're horrified of that aspect of our history. Yeah. So we take that fragment of our persona and we push it way down into the depths where it's completely inaccessible. Yeah. And you might be flooding your core personality with unconditional love, but you're flooding your core personality, not those slivered off fragments that you're unaware of.
So in a way, in a nice way, I don't mean this in a degrading way, it's like the epitome of spiritual bypass.
It absolutely is. And
not involving anyone else, just involving yourself. I mean, so I like your explanation, because at a minimum, it grossly delays the opportunity to clear and expand in a quicker pace.
So we have to do something to coax that energy out of the depths. Yeah. Those fragmented aspects of our persona that are so scared and so full of trauma that they get pushed down into the darkness. We can go our entire life not knowing that they exist, and yet we do know they exist because we have dissatisfaction and frustration in our lives. Right. If you have some sort of pattern that happens over and over and over again in your life that brings you pain or discomfort or frustration, that's evidence that there's some sort of trauma that's unresolved that you may be consciously unaware of. We create these, what I call karmic loops, where we have a traumatic experience that we simply cannot process in the moment, so we shove it down into the depths of our personality. Because it's shoved into our personality, it actually gets encoded into and infused in our energetic signature. Right. So it's like, imagine a Beethoven symphony, and there's this discordant note that somebody is playing at all times. That's the trauma that is playing in the background. So it's constantly being broadcast. The energy of it is constantly being broadcast to the universe, and the universe is constantly reflecting it back to you with opportunities to relive that experience over and over and over again until you clear it. Yeah. So, it manifests itself as somebody was sexually abused as a child, and then they go through their entire life falling in love with and having romantic relationships with exactly the same persona in different bodies. And they're always befuddled when it happens again. Yeah. It happened to me in the work type of environment. I had a past life unresolved trauma that got echoed in this lifetime. And what eventually happened to me is in the restaurant industry, every single restaurant job that I ever took, I would be hired as a manager. And within 2 weeks of me being hired, a different manager would quit or get fired, and they would ask me to do both jobs with no bump in pay. It happened. It was uncanny. It was like, and I'm not talking 3 jobs.
No, I can totally relate to that. They used to call me a monster, in my old life, take on 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs. And not get a bump in pay and work 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. I was going to ask you, you talked about the situation when we talked about unconditional love. You talked about loving yourself unconditionally in this moment, and then also mentioning the future Patrick or the future Todd. Do you talk to your future self?
Yes.
You alone? And how does that go, and how does that work for you?
Well, I have to say I don't do it very often. In my mind, my higher self is my future self. So when I'm connecting with my higher self, I'm essentially connecting with the version of me that has already completed all this work. Yeah. But in terms of connecting with the future version of me that is halfway there, I don't do that very often. However, I do one exercise. I love to envision where I would like to be in 5 years and pour energy into setting up that scenario 5 years from now. Now, this brings up a really, really important and crucial concept. So I'm glad you brought that up. Every single thing that you are experiencing in your life at the present moment is a reflection of all of the thoughts, beliefs, judgments, and expectations and so forth that you've had in the past. Everything that happens to you is the perfect reflection of the energy that created it. So everything is absolutely perfect in the present moment because it's the perfect reflection of the energy that created it, even if that energy was negative, limiting, or painful. So there is perfection even in the things that are going wrong. It just shows that your negative thoughts, beliefs, judgments, and expectations can create negative experiences. Yeah. So if it's true that your current experience is caused by your past thoughts and belief systems, you right now at this present moment in time are actively creating your future through whatever you're thinking right now and whatever your beliefs are, your judgments, your expectations. So the crucial point here is that you cannot continue to think the thoughts that created this mess in the first place and expect something new to emerge in the future.
Yeah.
I have a number of clients who come to me who want their pain to go away, but they don't want to do anything to change what created the pain in the first place.
Yeah. They don't want to throw out the sacred cows.
Yeah, they want the magic wand waved, and
Yeah.
you know, magic wand solutions exist. Miracles happen. But if you go to a healer and say, I will only settle for a miracle and I refuse to do anything to change my thoughts, beliefs, judgments, and expectations in order to create that miracle, then the odds are against them.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
You can't throw any absolutes down with the universe.
Yeah.
There are no absolutes with the universe.
Yeah. So I normally say two things. If you want a different future, you must let go of the past, and you must identify in your past whatever it was that created this mess now and purge it from your life. That's got to choose something different
Yeah.
to create something better.
Right on.
So yeah, it's
let's go in one more thought-provoking question. I'd love to see what your perspective is on it, and then we'll go into your book a little bit and how we can get in touch with you. I got your website. I'm going to pull up here in a second. People talk about we're out of the linear, we're in a quantum existence, a quantum realm now. You know, recently, at least in my own little universe, I've started to understand that at a minimum, there's a possibility that my own observations and the thoughts that come with it create, obviously, that's quantum, but that it may very possibly have an effect on other universes, being people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I'm thinking so-and-so is, you know, less than congenial, then so-and-so, I may have a direct influence on so-and-so being less than congenial. Mm-hmm. What is your take on the quantum realm from a personal soul responsibility, self-reliance of the soul standpoint? Creator, co-creator. How much responsibility do we have? How much power do we have in this quantum experience? And what's the potential?
Yeah, it's a funny answer I'm going to give because it's a little bit ironic. So on the one hand, everybody has much, much, much more power and agency than they give themselves credit for. So through your energetic orientation and your thoughts and your beliefs, you are a powerful generator of your experience in the world. And if you have like an energy of conflict, you're addicted to conflict, you're addicted to drama, you'll attract into your life people who love to play along with you, and you just create more and more drama.
Yeah.
And these energies, they mushroom, they balloon, they congeal together, and they constantly grow as long as you're pouring energy into them. So you have tremendous agency. And a lot of times people don't realize that the bad things that happen to them are actually evidence of just how powerful you are. Yeah. So once upon a time, I was complaining to a friend of mine that every single month I'm $400 behind. So it was uncanny. It went on for years. Every single month, no matter how much money I made or how little money I made, at the end of the month, I was $400 away from paying rent. It's just weird. And I was complaining to a friend of mine about it, and her response was, "Wow, you are really powerful."
Go figure.
Because I was creating that. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, we have immense agency and we're much more powerful than we think we are. On the other hand, we're all programmed. We all have these phony limitations, these phony belief systems, these phony expectations that are programmed into us from the age of birth. From the age of when you're born to about 7, you are an energetic and thinking sponge, and you just absorb everything that people say to you, especially if they're authority figures.
Yeah.
And there's no authority figure more godlike to a child than their parents.
Yeah.
So, I relate in my book an experience I had when I was really young, in which my father was saying something really horribly bigoted. And, I absorbed that. It kind of soaked into me. And we all have these belief systems that we think are the truth of reality, but we've never questioned them. We've never asked, why do I believe this? Whose agenda does this serve? So there's a lot of reprogramming that needs to be done.
And we're the programmers now, right? We're basically conscious of the programming, and we can consciously program.
That's the goal. Thank you. That's beautiful.
You brought up your book. Let's see your book. Let's talk a little bit. Give us a brief overview.
Okay, this is, it's a shiny cover. Let me find. There we go. So this is Brain Cells, Escape Your Mental Prisons.
Right on.
And it is essentially a book about, it's not about the brain, it's about how the brain, how we get trapped into limitations and unsatisfying life. It's about the prison cells that we create for ourselves that don't really exist in reality, and how to set yourself free from those prison cells.
Right on.
So I spend a lot of time talking about, for example, the goggles that we all wear. So these goggles are distorted, view pieces through which we see the world. Our biases, our stereotypes, our judgments, and so forth create a vision of a world that's out of alignment with what it really is. But the brain processes it as absolutely true. And, it's people often say seeing is believing. That's not true at all. Believing is seeing. You see what you expect. You see what you believe. Yeah. And you filter out through a portion of the brain called the hippocampus. You blind yourself to counter evidence. And that's one of the ways that we get entrenched in political positions, where no matter how much evidence is given to us that what we're thinking might be wrong, we cling to it anyway. So we filter out everything that doesn't fit our expectation. So that's one section of the book. There's another section on the masks that we wear, authenticity, phony limitations, phony expectations, living somebody else's dream, living a lie, and so forth. And, unfortunately, a lot of this is a product of that transition from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius.
Yeah.
We are living in a period in which mendacity is rewarded. It's not just expected, it's rewarded. People can rise into incredible power by spreading lies.
Yeah.
And, there are whole industries that are built on, lies for profit. And we can react viscerally to that and never realize that we ourselves do that to ourselves. We lie to ourselves all the time about what our desires are. We lie to ourselves in order to please other people and to appease other people and to fit in and to make people like us. Quite often we don't realize that if you just live your truth, live your reality, shine your truth to the world, you don't have to worry about pleasing and appeasing other people and losing friends. Those people will go away, and you'll attract into your life people who resonate with you.
There you go.
That fear is meaningless.
Yeah. I think that frequency or that consciousness or that awareness is really starting to take hold now, at least at a minimum, a strong minority on the grid. But yeah, I totally,
it is
not my circus, not my monkeys.
Well, it is and it isn't, because at the same time, there's a really strong us versus them mentality that's emerging right now. So there's a good deal of conspiracy theory going on that is not founded in reality. But beyond that, I don't want to say anything because.
Well, that's a whole, I mean, there's a good deal of conspiracy theories not founded on reality, but there's a good deal of, I mean, I don't even pay attention to that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Because because I think it served its purpose. But that's an interesting point. It's an interesting point. And the other interesting point that I think you bring up, I want to go into your website here, but
cool.
is that in the new awareness of it's never them, it's always me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then the ultimate contribution to the collective in terms of no separation and into the frequency and balance of oneness is that it is all me. And if I look at, and if I, as the quantum observer and creator, look at things as being, there's an us against them mentality, then I'm the root of the cause, you know. And I'm not saying this is gospel, and I'm not saying this is Todd channeling, you know.
Yeah, but I agree with you. You know, heal yourself, heal the world.
Yeah, I'm just saying it seems like because the information is moving so fast. That it's just moving at light speed. You brought up the book, and you were talking about as a child the way we take this stuff in as a sponge. You know, we know that the level of the speed of information that comes into us at these early ages is extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
But there also seems to be, for the first time, at least in my existence over the last few years, as I'm observing people, we're picking this information up like we did when we were 5 years old, 6 years old. So it kind of changes everything. But I think this whole quantum thing, where we take the full responsibility for the co-creation and the collective experience, is in our face now. And I think it's growing more and more. And it's a very interesting subject that you bring up here at the end. So we could go on for a long time on this stuff. But let me pull up your site. This is Lightbridge, right? Lightbridge Academy.
That's the academy.
Yeah, and then right here it says here, click here to explore the catalog of Lightbridge courses. I'm going to go somewhere with this. Click here to explore the catalog of Lightbridge courses, non-educational audio packages. Visit Lightbridge Living. And then here's another section on the Lightbridge Academy courses and products. There's group calls. There's essential tools and techniques. There's a community involved here. I don't want to give away the whole ball of wax. What I wanted to ask you was, do you do session work with people, or do you only work in groups? Do you work online, or you only work in person?
All of the above.
Okay.
So I do. I would say that most of the time working with people, it's on live group events.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll do live group events. Usually I schedule it on a Sunday so people all around the world can join in. And we'll pick one specific subject and do a really deep dive into it. So each of the live events is like a mini workshop. And then what you were looking at, that Lightbridge Academy, that is for all of my structured courses. And there's a certification program attached to that. People can study Lightbridge without being certified. But if they want a certification in order to develop a business or enhance their current coaching or healing business, that's available. Right. So I do the live courses. The courses now, I don't teach them live anymore. I used to, but then I always have scheduling conflicts. So now when I teach a live course, I'll do maybe 2 or 3 sessions, especially Q&A sessions that are live. And then everything else is pre-recorded and dripped out. That way people can study at their own pace.
Right on. Right on.
And then I do one-on-one sessions with people. The vast majority of the work I do with people is over the internet or over the telephone. Yeah. And I've got clients I've got more clients in Vienna, for example, than I do in Los Angeles. So it's definitely an international affair.
Have you found, a quick question on the way out, have you found that, I know you've been doing this for quite some time, are you finding that your clients, the people in general that you're running across through your practitionership, are needing less, getting it more, expanding to the point where they can leave the nest quicker and that type of thing?
Yeah, and in fact, I'm a big fan of that. So once upon a time I was taught, and I rejected it the time I was taught it, that the best client is the one who never gets better. Because from a financial perspective, the best client is the one who never makes any progress. And what they do is they book you over and over again, essentially to have their energy soothed. And in medical terms, like I was listening to an NPR interview with a woman who ran a rehab center, and she said that in the rehab industry, the most lucrative client is the serial relapser. Yeah. So I do not employ that at all in my business. Yeah. Nothing makes me happier than for somebody to never need me again.
Yeah, one off.
Well, one off or maybe a two off. Usually a one off, it's not enough to really get into the subconscious mind. Mm-hmm. So the one offs are usually like soothing and energetic activations and so forth. But generally, 1 month, 4 sessions plus a couple of support sessions, some sleep sessions is enough to really get somebody to make some progress and then to move on and not need me anymore.
Right. Yeah. Well, man, very cool. Very cool. Thank you for your continued service to humanity. Look forward to future collaborations. Maybe we'll run into you out there in the desert.
I hope so. Yeah, I look forward to that.
I've got a friend that's, you're in Palm Desert or Palm Springs?
I'm in Palm Springs, but Palm Desert's pretty close.
Yeah, I've got a friend in Palm Desert that's rehabilitating after a little stroke. So I just want to send a big healing, peace, love, and comfort to Janet Gilliam. And maybe we'll see you soon. And thank you for all your continued love and support. And thank everybody for their continued love and support. And thank you for sharing space with us, Patrick, and honor us with your presence. Namaste.
Namaste.
Take care.
Bye-bye.